to fundraise, and also what they would do is, besides fundraising, is they would go and try and help people brush up on their Yiddishkeit, be a little bit more observant. So that's what he was famous for. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So how many menorah candles do you light? Well, the mitzvah is that every house should light one candle. That's the origin of the mitzvah. The minimal mitzvah is every house should light one candle. Even whether there's a lot of people in that house or there's only one person, you have to light one candle. If you want to do it in a more beautiful way, then you light one candle per person in the house, whether men or women. And if you do it more, then what you do is every day you write one on the first day and you go add one every day, every night. So actually, the way we do menorah is our tradition is to do one per male, one menorah per male, and add one every night. But the minimal mitzvah is to have one candle per night. The better job is one per person, and in halacha, the most prominent way of doing it is to do a menorah, add one every night. But we actually do it even more than that. We do one per male every night. We add in one every night per male.
So you do that by having one menorah for each person?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. That way that we do it is not actually mentioned in halacha. It's kind of hinted in Jewish law. It's kind of hinted to.
Because it was very expensive.
Yeah. So that part's not actually one of the options mentioned in the Gemara. The Gemara mentions three options: one candle per house, one candle per person, or add one every night for one menorah per house. Those are the three options. Okay. What do? You have 10 people in the house, and the first night you light 10 candles. The second night, so now the Rambam goes and he hints out in the Gemara that even though it gives three options, it says one menorah per house. Nevertheless, please don't interrupt. Please don't interrupt, because you're going to hear. So the Gemara gives three options. So the Rambam hints out, we see that there's the first option is one per house, and the second option is one candle per person, and the third option is one menorah per house. But we see that there's a quality in doing one per person, right? We didn't even get there in those days. So what do? Let's say we have 10 people. We write 10 the first night, second night 20, third night 30, until you find on the eighth night you have 80 candles. And this is the minhag that we do in Spain, in Sfard, that everyone should light their own, and you add one every night until you find on the eighth night 8 candles per person. In Sfard, they do one on the first night, and they add to it until you find on the eighth night 8 candles, whether it is a lot of people or one. So even nowadays, I think everyone does it, one menorah per male.
So is he
I think
saying?
the Friday even does per female.
I don't think Sfarad does per female. But one per male. Sometimes people they'll say single girls, like basically if someone's married, then they're under their spouse. Either the wife can light for the husband, as we'll see later, if the husband's not out of town, the wife can light for him. Or he's saying that the minhag in Sfard is they do one menorah per house.
So in Gimel, is he saying he doesn't do one per person?
Yeah.
So
He's saying that there's different customs. Okay, a candle that has 2 wicks, that's enough for 2 people. Let's say you have a bowl and you have wicks. You have a plate and you surround it with wicks. If you put a vessel on top so the wicks are sticking out, they're like separate. Then each wick is considered its own candle. But if you don't put a vessel, then it looks like a bonfire, so it doesn't even really count. What? I don't know.
So you could have a bowl of oil and you can float one wick.
So what you have to do is you have to basically have, if you have let's say you take a bowl and you stick wicks in, and then you stick another bowl on top. So now the wicks are kind of independent because there's a bowl covering the oil. But if they're all floating, then that's considered a madura. That's considered a bonfire. So that doesn't count, and it doesn't even count as one. You cannot light them before sunset. You light them around the time of sunset, not later and not before. If you forgot and you didn't light it with sunset, you can light it until people start walking the streets. How long does it need to, how long is that? About half hour. That time passes, you don't light it. And you need to put oil in it in order that could go until half hour until the people stop walking the streets. If you lit it and it goes out, you don't have to light it again. If it's lit until for that amount of time. So this is not necessarily how we follow it, but this is how the Rambam says you light it around. People in the olden days would finish working at night. There wasn't an option with lights and everything like that. Like lighting was much more difficult back then. So at sunset, people would start going home from work. For a half hour, it needs to burn for the half hour where people are on the street. After the half hour, you need to go and I'm not answering questions now. After the half hour, you can put it out if you'd like. You don't have to keep it burning.
You can put it out.
You can put it out. Everything, any oil and any wicks are kosher for Hanukkah, even if they're not great oil. And even Shabbos, you're allowed to light with these things. Even on Shabbos, Shabbos has to be a nice candle, nice burn. Even things which are forbidden on Shabbos, you can light now, because on Shabbos you're not allowed to use. On Hanukkah, you're not allowed to use the light of the menorah. You're not allowed to use the light of the menorah, whether on Shabbos or weekdays. You're not even allowed to count money or anything. You're not allowed to do anything next to the light, and therefore it doesn't have to be a nice wick. On Shabbos, it has to be a nice flame, because you're allowed to use the light, and we're worried that if it's not a nice flame, you'll try and fix it up better. Okay,
Right.
which is forbidden. It's a mitzvah to put it on your outside of your door, outside, close to the door, on the left side of when you're entering, in order that the mezuzah should be on your right and the Hanukkah menorah should be on your left. And if you live upstairs, so you don't have any doorway that you could put it by, then you should put it by the window next to the public domain. And if it's put up higher than 20 amos, it's not allowed, because people don't see 20 amos in the peripheral vision. In time of danger, you put menorah inside. Even if you put it on your table, that's enough. And it has to be inside your house, another candle that you can use. So that's where the shamish comes from. The shamish is a candle that basically you're not allowed to use the light of menorah, so they said put a extra candle that you can use that light. So you don't have to. So you have to have another light in your house. Bracha. Afterwards, I'll answer the question about it. Okay. All right. And you need to have in your house one light that you can use for light. And if there is a bonfire, you don't need another light. And if a person, let's say there's certain people who they don't use bonfires, because bonfires are flicker, they're hard to read by. So that's not enough for you to have light in your house. You have to have a special candle, like you would have like a lamp. You have to have a special candle in order that you're able to use that light, so you don't use the menorah light. Now, it's notable, back then candles were very expensive. Now they're very cheap. But back then candles are very expensive, so the rabbis are saying, but nowadays all menorahs have a ninth candle in order to take care of this. If a menorah is lit by a deaf mute or someone who's demented or a child or a Gentile, you didn't do anything. It has to be someone who's obligated to light it. Right? So all those people aren't obligated to light it. If you light it from inside and you take it outside, so you light it inside and then you move it outside in front of your house, you didn't do it until it's lit in the place you're going to leave it. If you use it and then you light it and then you keep it standing, people will say, oh, that's just you're using that one. If it's something which is burning the whole day, then you can put it out and relight it and make a bracha. Because the main thing of the menorah is not to have the menorah, it's to light the menorah. So you can't just, and not having a menorah. You're allowed to light it from another Ner Chanukah. That's a dispute if you're allowed to use the flame of another menorah or not. The Rambam says you're allowed to, because you're not allowed to use the light of the menorah. So you're using it for another menorah, so it's a debate if you're allowed to. If you have a Chatzer, you have a courtyard, and it has two doors in two directions, you need two menorahs. So people shouldn't say, if there are two directions, people walk by and say, oh, you didn't put a menorah. But if there's only one, then you only need but if they are on the same side, both on the east side, you only need one menorah. A guest who's lighting inside his house, who's having it lit inside his house, he doesn't have to have it lit in the place that he's staying. If he doesn't have a house to light it, he needs to light it wherever he's staying and he can donate some oil. And if he has a house for himself, even though he's lighting them inside his house, He needs to light it in the house that he's in. Oh, so, what people often do is when they're guests is, if they usually light their own menorah, but what they'll sometimes do is say, here's a $5, I want to give you $5, so I'm partnering with you in your menorah. But we said you also have to have a lit in your house. Mitzvah of the Hanukkah is very, very important. And you have to be very careful to let the miracle known and to praise God on the miracles that he did. Even if you don't have what to eat, except from tzedakah, you need to borrow money for the mitzvah of the Hanukkah.
Can I ask a question?
Or sell your clothing and buy oil and light it.
If you have a guest in your home who doesn't live there, who's a guest, and you're lighting your menorah, does that person share the mitzvah, or?
So he can light his own menorah, or he can pay a little bit in order to be partnering your menorah.
And if we own more than one menorah, he still has to pay something to use?
No, he can light his own. You can either light his own. You don't really need a menorah to light a menorah. Really, you can have 10 cups of oil, 8 cups of oil, or, so the menorah is just a nice facilitator. And, the Rambam says that it's nice to have a menorah made out of silver, particularly, because you make the mitzvah nicer. Interestingly enough, the Rebbe had a menorah made out of pure gold that someone gifted him, but he didn't use it. He used a menorah which was made out of brass, which was gifted to him by his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, and that was the menorah he used. A menorah is supposed to be beloved, but you can use, in the olden days, people used to take potatoes and carve out the potatoes and use. So you can either give him the option, if you're able to, of lighting his own menorah. A lot of times he'll bring his own menorah stuff, or you can give him the option of lighting his own menorah, or you can give him the option of paying some money, and could even be 5 cents, just to be part of it. Okay. If you only have one pruta, so you only have $1, one pruta is about 10 cents, right? You only have one bit of currency, and before you can either make kiddush, buy kiddush wine for Shabbos, or light the menorah. You light the menorah. That takes precedence, because they're both rabbinical obligations. You should do Hanukkah because it remembers the miracle. This is very famous. You can see over here the Rebbe spoke a lot about this next law here. If you can light Shabbos candles or Hanukkah, it's a choice. Then Shabbos candles come first. Shabbos come first because Shabbos candles are for peace in the home. That's what they represent. Shabbos candles come first because we know that God's name is erased for peace in the home. When there's a sota, when there's a lady who perhaps cheated on her husband, we erase God's name in order to make that special drink for her, because the name is erased for that. So that's Gadol HaShalom. How great is peace? That the whole Torah was given to make peace in the world, as it says, your ways are feel good, and your ways are peace. That's the end of the halachas of Megillah and Chanukah. So Megillah and Chanukah, we did the laws of Shabbos, the laws of Eruvs, the laws of Yom Kippur, the laws of holidays, resting on the holidays. And resting Kippur, Chametz Matzah, Shofar, Sukkah, and Lulav, Shkalim, Kiddush HaChodesh, Tainus, and Megillah and Chanukah. And that's the end of.
Wow, we finished the book.
The book, yeah.
So we start a new one tomorrow?
On to book 3. Okay. A lot of people went. To there. From Brooklyn, there are buses everywhere for free to go there. Busing a lot of people in. They have all the families of the hostages were flown there from New York last night, or I think they were flown from New York this morning, just to get over to New York, and they flew there, and then just tons of people went.
Well, we do, I think we have to make our presence known, because there's so much noise on the other side. And,
Yeah.
notwithstanding our own principles, it seems to me in today's world we have to make our presence known.
Yeah, especially for ourselves. I feel, especially for the Jewish people themselves, But okay, so we're on page 9. We're learning about the blessings of Yitzchak. Page 9. So we're at chapter 3. Page 20.
I have it more.
Okay.
November 7th. It's last week. Page 15.
Do we do page 9 already? What could be? What could I do? Let me just see. Actually, I thought I was doing a paragraph a week, so it could be. You're right. Give me a second.
Well,
Let me look at it.
whatever you say.
Yeah, let me go. Let me look at it.
I have page 7.
Oh yeah, we did. You're right. We did 3. We're at 4. Okay, so here's what we explained last week. We said that. So we explained 2 weeks ago. We said that even though Elokim usually connotes Mamali Kalalmin, what we mentioned yesterday, it connotes finite energy from God, the finite energy of God. And therefore, usually when you give a blessing, you want it from Havaya, you want it from infinite energy. You don't want God to have to work with the constraints of life. When we bless somebody, we don't just want a blessing that the medical procedures should be successful. We really want that they shouldn't need medical procedures. And the same thing we're praying for the Jewish people. We don't want that they should win a bloody war. We want that the war should be higher than nature. We want to see God's hand in it. So our question was, why is Yitzchak giving blessings and why is Yitzchak receiving blessings from Elokim? So we answered, we said, the truth be told is that Yitzchak and Elokim and Gvura, even though externally it connotes finite and the limited world and limited energy, that's really represents strength of God. Because for God to create a finite world in a certain sense takes more strength. Right? It takes more strength. So because it takes strength, that's why ultimately if you have a way, Yitzchak knew how to harness that energy to actually give much greater blessings from Elokim. And so last week we said, we started the paragraph, we said, well, let's get in the context what that means. So we said was Avraham was too afraid to bless Yitzchak because he knew that Yitzchak would have Esav. And he didn't want Esav to receive such great blessings because he knew Esav is going to do bad stuff. So what did he do? He said, Yaveh Bal HaBrachis, he says, let the one who gives the brachas again, because no tzaddik is giving their own bracha. They don't have they have connections with God, so to speak. They're just, God chooses them as a leader of the Jewish people to be able to harness his blessings. They're like God's shaliach to give. Right. So Avram says, whoa, I bring all these blessings to the world, but I don't know if I want to bring a major blessing here, not because Yitzchak, but because Esav is going to come out of him. I don't know if I want my blessings to go to Esav. So we see from there that, so what happens right after? God says, oh, I'll bless him. That's what he says, Yaveh Bal HaBrachis. I will bless him. So now it comes out that even though Yitzchak has God's blessing, and Yaakov has God's blessing, and Esav have it, because Avram chose not to bless. And he said, let God do it, and God did it. So that means they already have, by default, a great blessing. Comes out that the blessing from Elokim, it has to be much greater than the blessing from God in the times of Avram. Because Jacob has that blessing. We know that blessing is inherited, because that's what Avram was afraid of. So it comes out that Vayithan Lecha Elokim, the blessing in this week's parsha, is much greater. Now what we're going to do is explain what is the difference, why is this blessing from Elokim so great? Okay.
It is confusing because it is divine providence that Esav is Esav. Right? I mean, he came from Jacob, but Jacob didn't create Esav. God created Esav. So that's still a divine creation. Even though he's going to be a bad person, by changing the blessing, you're intervening sort of in the divine providence that's going on.
Well, okay, let me try and see if I understand your question, but let me explain something else which is related to it. This actually has a lot to do with free choice. Now, I'll tell you why. Because there's two things going on. We're always intervening with divine providence when we make choices, right? So actually, Esav, so the Rebbe asked a question from another angle. He says the Torah says that before they were born, Esav, it says that whenever Rivka would go by a house of idolatry, the kids would fight inside. Whenever they go to synagogue, one of them was happy. And whenever they go by idolatry, one of them was happy, right? So Esav was happy by idolatry. So the Rebbe asked a question, he says, well, how could it be? Esav's not such a bad guy. Even before he was born, he already was attracted to idolatry. Where's his free choice? So the Rebbe has a very interesting answer. He says free choice isn't, you don't have a choice to do everything. There's some things you simply don't have a choice of. Esav's free choice wasn't to like idolatry or not. Before he was born, he liked idolatry. His free choice is what to do with that inclination, what to do with that impulse. What do you do with that impulse? Do you go and do you fight your impulse, or do you embrace your impulse? That was his choice. So the Rebbe actually notes, and he says, Esav, his problem was not that he had impulses to do bad. His problem was that he didn't fight his impulses to do bad. That was because your choice isn't necessarily what impulses you have. That might be God's providence that he gave you really, really bad impulses. Your choice is what you do. Do you try and overcome them? Do you try to harness them for good things? So now, Avram also has a choice. Avram's giving you a blessing. He knows Esav has very, very bad impulses. Avram's looking, I'm going to give a blessing. I'm going to inherit tons of money, spiritual money to my grandkid. He has bad impulses. I can't imagine how he's going to overcome it. Obviously, God believes in him, right? But I don't know. So God, I don't want to give my money. I'm just saying money as an example. I don't want to give my money to him. How about you give him the money, and you're the one who really gave me everything I have, and I'm just a conduit of taking the money you gave to me. And I'm just a conduit of taking the money you gave to me, right? To move on. So you, how about you just give the money and you decide what, if you want Esav to have it. So this is what Avram is doing. He's just saying, he's saying, boy, Esav's going to be in a mess. I don't know for sure. Esav is going to be born with bad impulses. So his life is at high risk to those impulses. Hopefully he'll overcome them. But because it's so hard to overcome them, I don't want to invest. I want God, instead of giving to me the ability to give to him, I want God to choose to give to him directly or not, because it's at risk. That's what's going on here. So yes, when you serve God, are you mixing with divine providence? In a certain extent, you are mixing with divine providence. On the other hand, right, God gave Esav the ability to overcome himself, and he doesn't overcome himself. Well, it's divine providence that he's not able to, but in the future, that potential to overcome evil, we know in Jewish tradition, will eventually come in Esav's children later on, at some point in history. So actually, Yitzchak had really high hopes that Esav would do it then. And in the Zohar, it says Esav didn't do it. He could have, but he didn't. And it's divine providence. But eventually, the Esav gene will eventually overcome these things, maybe in a couple thousand years. So that's what's going on here.
It's a hard thing to know if the impulses that Esav had are a test, which it sounds like it is, then which blessing is more beneficial to Esav to overcome his bad inclinations and pass the test favorably? Would it be Abraham's blessing or Elohim?
So Abraham basically, Abraham did. He wasn't sure. Abraham wasn't sure. A lot of times you look and sometimes you'll see you'll have somebody who works very hard and his kids inherit a lot of money, and they have no connection with Judaism. And then one of their kids goes back to Judaism, and now suddenly that money that they had, which had no connection to Judaism, now does. So Avram did not have high hopes in Esav. He said, Esav looks like he's going to do a lot of damage. I don't know if I should bless him. So God, obviously, he knew that Esav has potential to do good, and eventually, someone in his family, nothing will be wasted. Everything will be used out for good. But Avram was doubtful, and that's why he told, let God bless him. And God blesses Esav. And look, Esav was very strong throughout history. Esav was Rome, and a lot of people say that America is essentially Roman. Esav was always very strong, and Avram was like, wow, there's a huge risk factor in him. Let God bless him. Yitzchak wanted to bless him, but we'll do it actually. We said in chapter 4, what we said is we explained how Yitzchak wanted to bless him. So the Chassidus says that this is a greater blessing than Avraham, and Yitzchak wanted to bless him because he saw that Esav, because he had such hard impulses and such a hard animal soul. Which, by the way, next week we're doing the animal soul, because we'll see in Mondays the animal soul is actually higher than everything. It's like because it has tremendous potential. So Yitzchak saw that Esav had a really high potential, and that's why he wanted to bless him. However, Jacob and Rivka, they said, 1 second, he has high potential, but there is a big risk. Not necessarily is he the one who, everything always ends up on the good side. Everything ends up good in the end. Eventually. So Yitzchak, he was kind of like black and white. He was kind of like, oh, Esav is going to be the one who's going to bring us so close to God. Let's give it to him right now. Rebecca and Jacob, they were like, wait, no. Maybe his grandkids, we have to wait for it. We have to wait for it to be clear that the investment has to be made.
But God gives no indication to any of them with what to do in this with regard to the blessing.
Well, so
he doesn't tell Abraham. This is
God blesses him directly. So God says, I'm going to bless him. Because, however bad Esau is going to be, obviously, for God's above time. And so when Mashiach comes, we can also view things above time. But when you're above time, all suffering lasts for just a second. It's relatively insignificant if you're above time. So for God, God is saying, Avram and Yitzchak, they're like, no, we don't want to suffer. And God is sometimes like, well, part of the mission in the world might be to suffer a little bit, and so Avram might say, like, not under my watch. If God needs to do it, and really that's what we say a lot. If God needs us to suffer, then we'll accept it. But we're not going to bless people to suffer. We're not going to suggest it to God. We, on the contrary, we'll pray to God that we don't suffer. If God needs us to suffer, okay, well, God's God. So Yitzchak, and there's a lot of Yitzchak saw that, the potential in him, but he didn't see the negative potential. Rebecca and Isaac saw the negative potential, and God ultimately, kind of worked with Jacob and Rebecca, and
God knows everything.
So God knew that, this would have to happen. They'd have to go to Jacob. The blessing would have to go to Jacob first, and then, Jacob, because what we mentioned last week at the end is we said the revelation of Esav potential is through Jacob. That's who it's through. That's what we're doing in the world. So that's how God set it up. Okay. Number 5. Now, in order to understand what these supernal lights are through which the sparks are refined. So what we said is the blessing to Jacob was really, hey, Jacob, you guys are going to have this abundance spiritually in order that you will be able to use it to transform Esav. Right? You, Jacob, Yitzchak wanted to give his blessings to Esav. Because it's almost like, in money terms, let's imagine it's like, Esav, you're going to be, Yitzchak saw that Esav is so creative, he can make the most successful inventions. But Rebecca and God ultimately saw, no, Esav is very creative, But a lot of times, the most creative people make the most successful inventions, can also make the most terrible inventions, the most destructive things. So the blessing comes to Jacob, and Jacob gets these blessings where he knows what to do with them. These blessings are for us to transform Esav, to transform the world, which is represented by Esav. So now what we're going to do is understand how, and these blessings are called the dew of the heaven and the fat of the earth. And our job is to take our abundance, materially and spiritually, and not only use it in order for us to get close to God, but in order to get the whole world close to God.
So we're helping Esav sort of externally.
Yeah. I want to mention in the prophets, when it says Esav coming back, it says basically Esav will be burnt to a crisp. That's how Ovadia writes it. He was a proselyte from Esav. And burnt to a crisp in the commentaries either means the evil ones will be burnt to a crisp, literally, or some of them will reveal in them a passion for God. So there are a lot of people nowadays who say, well, nowadays there are a lot of non-Jews who are very supportive of the Jewish people, and it's somewhat unprecedented, considering for most of Jewish history, those non-Jewish ancestors were murderous to the Jewish people. And they say, like, oh, this is getting closer to Mashiach, where you have people revealing their identity. Some people have to be burnt to a crisp, unfortunately. And some people, on the contrary, they're actually looking in ways to get closer to the Jewish people and looking in ways to be supportive of the Jewish people. Okay. We are going to try and understand what is the Oidus Elyonim. What are these supernal lights, energies? And remember, we spoke about light yesterday. That was a lot of those things you could give a whole class on, the difference between light and giving anything else. But these supporting lights which will go and they will transform the sparks. We'll understand this according to what's brought in Torah Or, which is authored by the Alter Rebbe, and the Maimarim that we mentioned earlier, which this is based on. The klippas, so you have everything in the world has, every good thing has an opposite, and we're always like that. There's never a mitzvah that we do that our Yetzer Hara is not going to try and challenge in some way or another. And whenever we have a really strong sense of belief that God's in control, we're always going to have a really strong sense of doubt. That's always the way it is, right? So every God, and the reason why it's like that is because if we would have a strong belief in God and there was no sense of doubt, well, then we would be really good Jews. We would be really good Jews. We wouldn't have to make sacrifices for the right thing. If you don't have a challenge, so everything, as soon as you're in a really good place spiritually, be on guard, because you know what's coming. There was an amazing story of a guy at the Kinnos. So the Rebbe had a stroke in 1992, and people were very lost what to do. When the Rebbe had a stroke, the Rebbe was giving so much guidance. So there was a rabbi who said, younger rabbi, he said that he heard this older rabbi 10 years ago or 20 years ago at the Kinnos, say, I was from the older rabbi is from Tulsa, Oklahoma. So he was once, he said the Rebbe had a stroke, and the Rebbe was really building up people, Mashiach's going to come, and the Rebbe had a stroke. He was devastated. And a day later, someone comes to him and says, oh, Rabbi, I forgot. A couple of weeks ago, I visited the Rebbe, and I said regards from you, which is like a big deal to speak in front of the Rebbe. You say regards from you. And the Rebbe gave me $1 for you, and I didn't give it to you yet. So he felt that the Rebbe, the Rebbe always spoke how Rebbes know their sicknesses that are coming. The Rebbe gave $1 that afterwards he said, no, the Rebbe's still connected, the Rebbe's still watching, so he got the $1. So there was a younger Chabad rabbi said, it's so not fair, I wasn't a rabbi then, I was a kid. I never going to get $1 from the Rebbe like that. So it was at the Kinnos, and he was eating at a restaurant with his family, and suddenly gets a phone call. Someone says, hey, I just bought in this market here, and I see $1 with your name and date. People write their name and date that you got it from the Rebbe. So he said, he was astonished, literally right when he was thinking it. So he went and he got the $1. He felt it was like a miracle. He got this exactly when he was thinking, hey, I never get anything like this. So he gets the $1 from the Rebbe, and he said, oh no, now I know something really bad's going to happen, where I know I have this extra chizuk, I have this extra inspiration. And he said, you know what, nothing happened. Sometimes, not always does something happen. But usually, so now, it says that the 10 spheros are the way God emanates in this world. There's 11 negative sphirot. They're called klippas. 11 negative klippas. They're on the opposite side. They emanate darkness in the world. So you have God's light in the world, and you have darkness in the world. So the light comes in the 10, numbers 10, and darkness comes in 11. Why? Holiness comes in 9. It just says in the Zohar 10, not 9 and not 11. And there's a whole discussion why the Zohar is saying that and why specifically 10. Ultimately, we don't know. God decided to emanate 10, and actually, it's interesting. 10 is like a complete number. 10 is a very complete number, and the reason why that is because God built the world out of tens. It says there's 11 impure crowns, and those are what emanate darkness in the world. And again, those are just there to counter the 10 spheres of holiness.
These are created by God as well.
They're created by God, of course. Of course, everything's created by God. Because
so
again,
this is like an alternate universe.
well, it's basically you have God the way He emanates in the world through holiness, and you have God the way He emanates in the world through darkness, through doubts. For us, we have doubts, and we have all sorts of constraints that want us to give up. You know, sometimes we might want to do something good, but we can't afford it, and we say, okay, just give up. Or we might want to, we want to do something, but we don't feel good about it, or whatever it is. So there are basically, free choice is not, free choice has a lot to do with this, because free choice is basically, you are programmed with two voices, and they both sound good, and they're both created by God. There's the dark voice and a light voice. And our job is to choose the light voice. But it's difficult because the dark voice is perfectly programmed to counter the light voice. It's not just,
It's a mirror image.
It's a mirror image. So, okay. So, that is why in the Ketoris and incense, there's 11 ingredients. 11 ingredients. So actually, there's pretty amazing notes here, but I'm not going to go into it. But that's why there's 11 letters in the word Yiskadal V'Yiskadash. This number 11 has to do, so we'll actually read it. In Sefer Eitz Chaim, in the book about angels, Eitz Chaim is authored by Rav Chaim Vital. It says the 11 ingredients of the Ketoris and the 11 curtains of the goat's hair on the Mishkan and 11 curses in Parshas Kisaveh are the 10 klippos of Noga, and they have a vitalizer from the holiness that vitalized them. And the 10 spheres of holiness, the vitalizer gets swallowed up within them, and that is why they are only counted as 10. But the klippa, the vitalizer, does not get swallowed up within them, because the holiness does not mix in with mundane, except it stands on their head from above. So that's why he adds that there are 11 letters, so as to elevate the 11 ingredients of the Ketoris. Okay, so basically, God, who gives energy to the klippas? Who gives energy to the klippas? Well, God gives energy to everything. So we spoke yesterday how God gives energy to the 10 spheros. Almost done, yeah. God gives energy, we're going to stop in a second. God gives energy to the 10 sphirot, right? He gives energy to the 10 spheros. So, but they're called 10 because when God gives energy, it becomes, they're one to receive from God. It becomes part of them. However, God giving energy to the 11 klippas, God doesn't really get along with them. He creates them to go against Him. So therefore, their energy doesn't really become internalized. It's almost like outside of them. And that's why there are 11 of them. And that's what we're going to say. That's why there are 11 ingredients, the Samaman, and 11 ingredients in the Ketoret, because God did give us little tricks to help us overcome them, the Ketoret and stuff like that. And we're going to talk more about it next week. Let's stop here.
So God creates this.
What are we talking about now?
What does Mommy say?